Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, the show where we take a prominent film, figure, or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, is it overrated or is it underrated? I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, DeAngelis. Dylan, I don't have a special intro for us today because I couldn't think of two characters in this film that we're similar to.
I can't be the Nova to your Taylor?
No.
Yeah, because if that was the case, I wouldn't have any speaking lines. You'd have to do this podcast solo.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to do that. It's also, I don't think either of us are very ape-like. You have no hair, and I'm not that big.
No, if we had John on the podcast, he's a very hairy person.
He's so hairy, yeah. He could be one of those orangutan council members. He has the long, mane of hair.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. The shout out to John, friend of the pod, occasional guest co-host.
He's been on the pod 2 times now.
When one of us isn't here, he'll fill in. And he did watch this movie with us. Speaking of this movie, we're going to be talking about Planet of the Apes today, the 1968 original starring Charlton Heston. So, we're talking about this because the new movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, just came out, and neither of us had seen this movie. I was thinking about it. Is this the oldest movie we've talked about on the pod?
So far, for sure. Yeah. 1968, a very long time ago. I mean, it's older than my parents.
Yeah, we really dug back a little bit for this one. And I think, personally, I was pleasantly surprised by what I thought was pretty healthy pacing, good, captivating storytelling for the time. When we did Mad Max last week, or we're releasing it next week.
Yeah, Mad Max will be next week for anybody listening to this.
We had a lot of issues with its pacing, and we chalked a lot of it up to being oh, it's old. But that movie is newer than this movie.
Turns out it was just Australian. Yeah. That was the problem.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just kind of being upfront that I like this movie. But what were your overall thoughts?
Yeah, the Planet of the Apes franchise in general is one that kind of feels like a bit of a blind spot to me. I had only previously seen the 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes, which is directed by Tim Burton. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit in this pod. The original 1968 one had 4 sequels that were made immediately after this movie, 1970, 71, 72, 73. They made 4 sequels to this one movie. And then there are also 5 essentially prequel films to this franchise, the 4th one coming out this weekend. So there are 9 films in the Planet of the Apes franchise, I guess 8 within the canon of the story. However, if you want to do the Tim Burton one or if you want to do the original one here, I agree. This movie holds up really well for a movie as old as it is. I think that isn't due to some really amazing practical effects. The monkeys do not look fake, despite the fact that, listen, they look a little fake, right? Mm-hmm. Every single time their mouths are moving, you could tell that it's a rubber mask over them. Though I was looking at some photos from behind the scenes of how much, how long the actors would have to sit in the makeup chairs to get, the full ape costume on. Specifically, Kim Hunter, who plays Dr. Zira, and Roddy McDowall, who plays Dr. Cornelius. It's really, really good. And if those costumes weren't as good as they were, this movie wouldn't hold up at all. It would look stupid.
Yeah.
And luckily, they don't. And it's solid. And you totally believe that they're apes, even though it's a person. It's a person in a monkey suit. It's not like the new ones, which are just incredible CGI and motion capture in the new ones. This is all practical. And I think it holds up great.
Yeah. I mean, you can compare it because the Tim Burton one, I think, was also practical for the apes. And it's almost 40 years have passed in between the release of those 2 films. And the Tim Burton one doesn't look that much better in terms of the ape effects than this one. For the 1960s, they really knocked it out of the park. And even in those moments where it's a little weak or where you really just know that these are rubber mouths, which is especially prominent when the 2 apes are kissing.
Yeah, those rubber mouths, they just fold in on each other.
They just go on. But it's so funny that it just, to me, it elevates.
Yeah, the first time you saw them kissing, it took you out immediately.
It's so good. But yeah, even when it looks bad, and that's only on rare occasions, it's still good, just in a different way. So the ape effects I thought were great. I thought that the set designs were really interesting and cool to look at. You're an architect. What did you think of the I guess the ape city and the way those huts were designed.
Well, the planet that they're on, which I guess spoilers will spoil the big twist of this movie, that they're on Earth the entire time. This movie a lot of it was shot in the Grand Canyon area in Arizona. So they're obviously going for like their huts built out of rock formation. And it's clearly paper mache sets or like whatever material they use to like build out the rock architecture for the apes. But I thought it was really good, and it's fairly believable, this little like set of a town that they built for the ape city. Very believable, and it never comes off as a set outside of the opening, the spaceship that they're in. That's very clearly, there's no fourth wall there. They have one static camera shot of the inside of the spacecraft, which is fine. This movie had, like a $5 million budget. It's a fairly low budget movie. I guess $5 million is probably a lot more in 1968.
I usually don't do this, but for such an old movie, I did convert that. That would be like, I think 40 million today.
So it's be like a mid-size budget film now.
Definitely enough to put together a good sci-fi movie, but like compare that to like a Marvel movie or any other blockbuster, and it's just like, yeah, they made this for not that much.
That's part of the conversation surrounding the one that's in theaters right now, because that had a budget of 165 from what I saw online, and Avengers Endgame is what, 300 plus million, something like that. It's like double. Marvel movies like very easily can hit like double that. I think the Secret Invasion television show on Disney Plus had like $200 million as his budget. It's just absurd. So yeah, you can have really good special effects, whether they're practical or CGI, without breaking the bank. Somehow they have the magic touch here to do it.
Yeah, the thing about these Apes movies compared to those Marvel movies is that Marvel movies have like, at minimum, 5 A-listers that they need to give $20 million to a piece for all of their movies now. Whereas these Ape movies, they, I think this newest one, I don't know who's famous in it.
Yeah, the star of the new one is Freya Allen, who I only know from the Witcher television show. She plays Ciri in the Witcher show, but I would not think of her as the star of a major movie franchise, though. I haven't seen any of the new Planet of the Apes movies. I know I should watch them. I was looking at the Rotten Tomatoes scores before this pod. I was like, holy shit, it's just banger after banger after banger, apparently, with this franchise.
Yeah, and I think we both enjoy the Matt Reeves, the Batman, and he did that coming fresh off his Apes trilogy. I only saw the first Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I thought it was great. I don't know why I never went back and watched the other ones. I think it's because I was sad knowing that James Franco's character died or would die.
Spoilers.
I mean, he lives in the first movie, but then he's inexplicably not in the next two.
That's kind of a thing with the recent franchise, right? Is that the human characters are basically different in every movie.
And they just follow, at least for the first trilogy, this one ape, Caesar.
Yeah, that's the major difference between the new films and the originals, where the new ones are kind of painting the apes as the protagonist, where in the 1968 movie, it's very clearly Charlton Heston's character, Taylor, who is an astronaut. He is part of a crew of 4 people that I guess are supposed to go explore or colonize or something.
It's unclear. At one point, he implies that they're supposed to go off into the future and then all reproduce with the one female astronaut.
Yeah, they brought 3 men and 1 woman, which, listen, I'm no biologist. Seems a little backwards if you're going to do the ratio.
I think you just need a lot more people in general if you're trying to repopulate anything. And it's also, why is that their mission? Why were they going to the future in the first place? They can't report their findings back to anyone. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the first things they say after their spaceship crashed is like, because of relativity, they're like 2,000 years in the future from regular Earth, which is obviously setting up the twist later in the movie. It's giving you an idea of how long they've been gone from Earth proper. But yeah, what was their plan here? It's not important, right? But practically speaking, this mission made no sense from the jump.
Nope. But that's okay. It's kind of unclear like why the movie felt the need to have 4 humans if they kill one off in the first minute and then the other 2 off pretty quickly kind of after that.
Yeah, the woman dies in cryosleep. Her tank like cracks, and then the poor black guy gets killed. That's how you know it's a '60s movie. The black guy gets killed like 15 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, in like a hunting sequence by the apes. Yeah. And then the other guy gets lobotomized, actually.
Yeah, very unfortunate. That's tough. That's probably the big twist for me, at least, because I knew the general plot of Planet of the Apes. I think that most people probably know the plot of this film without having seen it, but I thought that it would be, maybe this is something that's in the 2001. I haven't seen the 2001 film since I was like a kid, but I assume that the apes were like slavers to the humans, and they were enslaving humanity. However, in this film, it's almost like the humans are just a nuisance to the apes. Like, the apes are totally cool with leaving the humans alone, but like the humans keep like eating their crops and shit. So they're like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to capture you then and do experiments.
Yeah, that did seem to be the apes' goal with why they were rounding up the humans. I think in the 2001 movie, they are slave owners. The apes do just kind of use the humans as servants. But that was like a different choice from Tim Burton.
It's a very interesting look at the different eras of America, right? Because this movie came out in 1968, so it's just after the Civil Rights Movement. Charlton Heston, I was reading, was one of like, when it comes to like Hollywood actors, he was like on the forefront of getting Hollywood actors to like be part of the protests in the Civil Rights Movement, which is notable because he's a white guy. And yeah, it's interesting that they don't go with the slavery angle or like the lesser human, the lesser beings angle so much as like, it's interesting. The ape society has its own hierarchy as well to it, where they have the chimpanzees and they have the gorillas and
the orangutans.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, they do mention that they had some sort of like segregation or caste system that they had just gotten rid of by the time the movie started. But like, if you look at it, the Council of Elders, they were all still orangutans, and the scientists were all chimps, and I think the soldiers were all gorillas. Like, they all definitely had roles based on their species. I read that behind the scenes, accidental segregation happened because the chimps, orangutans, and gorillas, when they ate lunch, they would all segregate into
That's pretty funny.
All of those background actors. They were like, I'm sticking with my own kind.
Sticking with the orangutans. Yeah. These are my guys.
Yeah. So let's run through the rest of the plot. So, spaceship crashes. There's a hunt. One of the astronauts dies. Charlton Heston gets captured. He gets shot during the hunt, so he can't talk. And then he finds out that all these apes around him can talk, and they're like scientists. They've been doing experiments. They believe that humans are a lower life form, basically like animals, or like how we think of, like, I don't know, crows or whatever eat our crops. And so they start doing experiments on the humans. And Charlton Heston is like desperate to prove that he is sentient and can talk and communicate. So he's recovering from a gunshot wound to the throat. So he can't talk for a while, and then he tries to steal like a pen and paper. Eventually he's successful, and he is able to communicate with one sympathetic doctor, Dr. Zira, who is a female chimpanzee, and I guess the wife of Dr. Cornelius.
That fiance.
Oh, the fiance. Oh, good for them. I didn't know that they had gotten engaged.
She wasn't wearing a ring.
Yeah.
She's like an animal psychologist, I think she says.
Yeah. And Dr. Cornelius, her fiance, is a scientist, and he has this working theory of a scientific hypothesis that he calls evolution.
He's an archaeologist.
Yeah. But he believes that perhaps the apes evolved from a more primitive being. Perhaps the apes evolved from man.
It's just reverse evolution.
Yeah.
Well, not exactly, because humans didn't evolve from monkeys.
We have a common ancestor, yes. And I think that's, and then what the, I guess, antagonistic force is in this movie is that the ape society has these like religious beliefs. They follow the sacred scrolls that really do not have room in them for anything that implies that anything but apes are sentient. And that faction is led by Dr. Zaius, who is pretty much the protagonist, I guess, of this film. And Charlton Heston eventually tries to escape, is unsuccessful, but then when he gets captured, his voice is finally recovered, and he shouts, "Yeah, take your dirty paws off me, you stinking apes," or something like that.
Dirty apes.
You damn dirty apes. Yeah.
It's probably the one plot point that I really don't like in the movie is that he gets shot with some sort of magic bullet that, one, doesn't kill him, but two, also specifically makes it so he cannot talk for an extended period of time. It is a plot bullet that he is shot with. So that's like the first suspension of disbelief. The much, much larger suspension of disbelief is the fact that he is able to communicate with these apes in English.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny that the apes all speak English, just 20th century English.
Yeah, it's the exact same communication that he's using. How, at no point in this film, was he able to put two and two together that he's on Earth? Throughout the film, he only sees three types of living beings. He sees the humans, who are now mute. They've regressed to like a primitive state. He's seen the apes, and he's seen horses. So in his head, he is thinking, oh, I am on an alien planet with these three specific species have also evolved. I guess that's just a thing that happens on planets with intelligent life.
So I was reading that, like, back then in the 60s, a lot of science fiction at the time would have alien planets that would basically just be Earth.
Just Earth.
Yeah, so it was, like, very common to, like, go to an alien planet, and the alien planet would have, like, a castle and, like, you know, just people. And that kind of changed after more space exploration showed how different the actual planets within our solar system
was this... I forget when this book was written. This is based on a book. I don't think we mentioned
it. Came out in,
that.
I think, 1963, based on a French novel.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is it... This is going to be after John Carter, right? Because John Carter...
I would guess.
Yeah, John Carter is a science fiction book that involves an alien civilization on Mars that's, like, always been on Mars.
Yeah.
And I think they're, like, legit aliens. I don't think they're humans. But yeah, that would make sense that common depictions of alien life are just humans.
Yeah, so I guess back in the day, you could get away with that twist a little bit easier. But I do think you're right. Like, I really went into this with an open mind, and every time they talked about anything, I was like, why are they going to be surprised at the end of this movie?
There's nothing more amazing than seeing the apes ride horses.
Yeah.
It's just so silly looking.
It's great. I mean, when you were playing Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, and then that dog person rode on the horses, or rode on the chocobos.
The chocobo, yeah. You get chocobo mounts, which are these like big birds. They're like ostriches. And one of your party members is a dog. The dog gets his own chocobo, goddammit.
Every time I would walk past you playing that game and I saw the dog riding the chocobo, I thought it was the funniest thing. So, yeah, points to this movie for similar things. When animals ride other animals, that's the sign of great art, in my opinion.
Which is something they do in the remakes as well. The monkeys ride horses.
I gotta go see these movies.
And they have guns. We didn't talk about that, but they have guns. Yeah. This is not like primitive technology they have.
Yeah, I think we tried to like gauge where the equivalent in our society, its timeline they would be, and we said that it would be like the 1800s or something. Yeah, so Rod Serling wrote the screenplay originally. He's the guy from The Twilight Zone.
Yep. Yeah, and you were saying when we were watching it, this just feels like a long Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, with like a bigger budget, more action. He wrote a story where the apes were basically 2,000 years ahead of us in terms of technology and weaponry. And then when the producers were reading the script, they were like, Rod, that's going to cost so much money. They brought in another guy to rewrite it who made it so that the apes were basically 100 or 200 years behind us at the time to save millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's interesting. You got to imagine what has happened within the canon of this universe, right? If we are to believe that these apes are they're on Earth, they're in America 2,000 years from when Charlton Heston and his crew left from Earth. So what's happened in that period of time? Because obviously, like, the technology and the technological advances that the humans had happened. And I guess this is just one of those things where I know people talk about it all the time online, where if all humans died out tomorrow, like how long until you wouldn't see buildings anymore and roads, like how all that would just be covered with vegetation? Or we're just assuming that that's kind of what happened on this planet, and that the apes have certain things like guns and farming and other elements of human society, and they're just picking and choosing based on what is best for the film's budget?
Yeah, so they actually do kind of answer these questions in the sequels. I read the summaries for them, and it's cool because the entire, I guess, what is it, 5-film run, they do a time loop type of thing. So in the second movie, they reveal that there are mutant humanoids that are affected from nuclear fallout. So that answers the question of like what happened. It was nuclear bombs destroyed the world.
Wow, a movie released in the early 70s worried about nuclear war. Who could have guessed?
And then in the third movie, they send Dr. Zira and Dr. Cornelius back in time. They send themselves back in time because Dr. Zira is pregnant. And so they go back in time and are saved from the destruction of the world that, spoilers, happens at the end of the second movie. Charlton Heston launches another nuclear bomb and it wipes out the apes. So these two escape that. They go back in time. They have a kid. That kid grows up to become Caesar, which is the same name as the protagonist from the new movies. And then Caesar goes on to eventually found the planet of the apes after the nuclear destruction happens. So it's all one big time loop that kind of leads into itself, which I think is neat.
Yeah, I should note that the sequels did not review as well as the first movie. So the sequels are called Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. These titles are too long, just across the entire franchise.
Yeah, they're not very snappy. Planet of the Apes is already a pretty long title.
You need to do like what Star Wars does, where you just call it Rise, a Planet of the Apes story or something like that. Something real simple. I'm seeing Rise in theaters this week. I'm seeing Kingdom in theaters this week. I'm not seeing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
I don't know. I mean, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker is a pretty long title.
I understand it's entirely a marketing thing because you want to tie it back to the known IP, but holy shit, it's a mouthful. Anyway, the second movie has a 37% on Rotten Tomatoes. The third one has a 76, which is better, and then it's 52 and 36 after that. So the first one is very clearly the best one out of those first 5. I'm actually kind of interested in watching the sequels now, especially if they're not that long. That'd be very nice. All of them are on Disney Plus / Hulu right now, we found out. So you can watch all 8 that are not in theaters. You can watch them all right now on Disney Plus, which is incredible. I definitely want to check out the Matt Reeves ones. Like I said, it's just a blind spot for me. I'm surprised I haven't seen them yet. I've heard nothing but good things, though.
Yeah, me too. I mean, again, I've only seen the first one, but it's good. Tom Felton's in it, I think. He tortures the apes.
Come on, Draco. What are you doing, man?
Yeah, I know. But yeah, overall, the franchise just seems cool. Like, even the old movies, even the ones that don't review well, they sound like kind of fun, bad B movies to watch.
Yeah, doing weird time travel stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's at least interesting.
Yeah.
If you're going to be bad, at least be interesting.
They're really swinging for it. Charlton Heston refused to be in any of the sequels until he finally relented to be in the second one. And he said, only if you kill off my character and only if I'm only in it for about 15 minutes.
Oh, my God. He went full Harrison Ford with it.
Yeah, after being in one movie. But I guess he was like 45 or 46 at the time, which is like being 80 in 1968. So
even though he only died back in 2008, so he lived a good bit longer.
Did he live to see Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
I believe so. Rise came out in 2011, so he missed it.
He missed it. So the last Planet of the Apes he could have seen was the Tim Burton.
Sorry, man.
I would love to see how much he hated the Tim Burton movie.
So we talked about the makeup a little bit here. That has aged really well. I think the set designs aged really well. Let's talk about the one thing in this movie that has not aged very well, and that is the portrayal of our lead female character. Her name is Nova, played by Linda Harrison, who I checked on Wikipedia is an American actress, so she speaks English. She has no spoken lines of dialogue in this movie. Now, the in-universe explanation for it is that the humans are mute, even though Dr. Zira talks about how they have vocal cords, they have the ability to speak, but for some reason they don't speak anymore. I don't know if that's something that's fleshed out in later films, or if Nova talks in the later movies. But in this, they give Nova to Taylor as like a mate, basically. Which I guess is normal in the context of that's something that humans do with animals in like zoos, right? Especially if they're like two endangered animals or something like that. You're like, listen, you two got to make kids. It's going to happen. But because they're humans, this is just deeply, deeply unsettling.
It does feel weird. So originally in the second to last draft of the screenplay, Nova was going to get pregnant with Taylor's child. But one of the producers was like, okay, that's weird because we kind of are saying that these primitive humans have like the mental capacity of animals. And if our protagonist impregnates one, then that feels really uncomfortable and bad. And they were like, okay, we'll cut that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that does, the whole like romance subplot between him and Nova is just not really well done. And that uncomfortable feeling never goes away while you're watching this movie. They don't do anything to fix it.
Yeah, every single time you see them like laying together, I'm like, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it's strange.
There's a really good YouTube channel that I like that does video essays on movies and TV called Pop Culture Detective. He did an episode called Born Sexy Yesterday, which is an exploration on film and TV that have this trope of women characters who basically have the mind of a child or the mind of like an animal or something like that, but they're in the body of a hot woman, so they're played as like a sex symbol. One of the notable examples used in that is Fifth Element, which is a movie that, you know, maybe we'll do that for an episode. But so Mila Jovovich in Fifth Element is a woman that is like just born or something like that in the movie. She's only a few days old, but she's in the body of Mila Jovovich, who's super hot. So Bruce Willis is like, that's my love interest for this movie. And again, it doesn't feel good at all. It's weird. Yeah. And it's just something that movies do, I guess, because oftentimes your lead is going to be a guy and you want to give the guy a heterosexual love interest, and this is the way that they can write it in.
Yeah, I do feel like movies nowadays have a lot less interest in just shoehorning romances into stories, but especially back in the 60s, it was almost like required that you would have that romantic subplot because you're trying to make movies for everyone. So like your weird kind of heady sci-fi piece has to have like an action hero, and then the action hero has to have a girlfriend. So I kind of get why they were...
Because if he doesn't have a girlfriend, then he might be gay.
Right.
Can't have a gay guy in our movie.
I don't know why they just killed off the female astronaut immediately and didn't just have her be the love interest.
Yeah, it's a slam dunk right there.
Yeah. Or, you know, he does kiss the female chimpanzee scientist.
No, that was your favorite part of the movie. You want to rewind it.
It's so funny because, okay, so at the end of this movie, Taylor, the human, says to Dr. Zira, the sympathetic chimpanzee female doctor, he says, "Doctor, I could kiss you right now." And she's just like, okay.
Okay.
And then
she looks directly at the camera. She's like, that's not in the script.
It cuts to her fiance and Nova, who is Taylor's love interest, and they're also just staring with their mouths kind of open at the
movie introduces a cross-species love quadrilateral out of nowhere.
It's so insane. It's so funny. It's great.
I think that's part of what makes this movie enjoyable to me is that there's a level of charm and humor to it that is probably not intentional.
I think that gag was pretty intentional. I think most of the gags are intentional, with the exception of like sometimes the monkey mouths look bad.
Yeah, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious do you think this movie is taking itself?
I think it's taking itself seriously. It just has jokes written in. So I know that the director went in and rewrote lines to be funnier after Rod Serling turned in the first draft.
They brought in Dan Harmon to do some rewrites.
Now, and the director, he had a lot of the Apes improv some stuff on the set I was reading. So he definitely left a lot of room for humor in this project.
Interestingly enough, not a lot of monkey noises.
Yeah,
they mostly just speak English.
At one point, I think there might be some like ooh ah ah cheering when they're like beating up Taylor or something. But you're right, there's not a ton of that. There's a lot, I think, in the new trilogy or quadrilogy or whatever it is.
But yeah, it's pretty good, and I was surprised how much I liked it coming out of it. I think it's a movie, for the most part, holds up fairly well. I think the pacing at the beginning of the film is a bit slow.
A little slow.
But the plot in general is solid, and I do enjoy the reveal at the end of it, even though it has been spoofed and memed. I'm sure there's young people that know the shot of the Statue of Liberty on the beach and not realize it's from Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, for sure. I guess my favorite, like, spoof, have you ever seen the Simpsons episode where they go to Planet of the Apes, the musical?
I have seen some clips of it on Twitter this week because of the movie coming.
I hate every chimp I see, from chimpan A to chimpanzee, is one of the funniest lines from the Simpsons.
It's a bar.
It's so good.
I saw a couple clips of the musical, and I was like, what drugs were these people doing?
I was thinking about watching it to prep for this episode, but I didn't get the chance. I might just do it immediately afterwards. Yeah, you got anything else before we go into how we think this is rated?
No, I think this will be a very interesting rating because, yeah, it's a movie that is good. It has sequels that are less good, but then it has these prequel films that came out much later that are, like, really, really highly regarded. So this will be an interesting one. So we're doing objective rating for just the 1968 Planet of the Apes.
Yes. So for context, this movie has an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is easily the highest of the original 5 movies.
Yep.
It got great reviews right away. It was a success at the box office, and then obviously it spawned 4 sequels. So this was a success at every level.
Spawned 4 sequels in 4 years.
And then 4 more sequels later and a remake. So yeah, big success. But we also have to consider how many people talk about it today, the original 1968 movie. I was talking to some friends yesterday, and none of them had seen it. I'm going to look at my letterboxd and see if anyone else I know has seen it. But yeah, what do you think?
I think an 8 is a solid landing spot for this.
You know, eventually we should just do away with this segment and just use the Rotten Tomatoes score as the objective
Even though,
rating.
obviously, Rotten Tomatoes isn't like the be-all, end-all.
It's probably one of the worst metrics to use as the objective rating, but at the same time,
average.
it has... Yeah, we can use the letterboxd average.
So we can use super stingy film bros and what their opinions are on movies.
I think it'll work. Let's go to letterboxd.
What is the letterboxd average for the Planet of the Apes 1968?
This has 4 stars, which would average out to be an 8.
Wow. Shout out to math.
Okay. But yeah, I do think we can just get rid of this segment, because I think when we tell guests that this is an objective rating, sometimes they don't understand what we're doing.
Yeah, they're like, well, I really like this movie. I'm like, no, that's not what objective means.
And it's like, well, even when we do it, like, how can we give an objective rating?
It is tough because oftentimes we're bringing on guests that really like the movie that they want to talk about. So when we bring on somebody who says, no, the Star Wars prequels are a 9 out of 10 for me, and we're like, listen, we're going to go a little lower than 9 out of 10.
Listen, that's on us, because this segment's just confusing.
No, listen, the podcast is malleable. We're always looking to improve things here.
It's going to streamline it a lot if we go straight to Letterboxd and say this is what we're doing, over or under 4.
Okay.
So Letterboxd is giving this 4 stars. Dylan, you have the task of saying that this movie is overrated. So you don't think this should be a 4-star movie.
So there's 2 main arguments that could be used to say that the Planet of the Apes film is overrated. Number 1, like you were saying, you can know everything there is to know about this franchise without ever having seen this movie. You can watch the recent films. You can watch the Tim Burton remake, even though the remake's not very good. It'll give you the same gist, except for the end of the film is not the Statue of Liberty on a beach. It is the monkey Abraham Lincoln statue at the very end of the film, which is just incredible. So it's that, and then there's also the fact that this movie is not the peak of this franchise. The peak of this franchise is way later down the road. We talked about this movie made $33 million on a $5.8 million budget, which is good. The recent films made $490 million, $710 million, and $482 million at the box office. This franchise is one of, the franchise overall is very underrated because it's a monster at the box office. It makes a shitload of money. even though these original films, they didn't make a ton. Like you said, they were kind of B movies, the sequels to this original. So that is where it was. And if you have a movie where the sequels or the prequels, like decades later, are overshadowing the original, then yeah, the original is probably a bit overrated then in hindsight. Not to say it's a bad movie. I mean, we've been talking about this whole podcast, that how much we like it, but when it comes to mandatory viewing, this definitely isn't that. And I also think, generally speaking, that this movie probably doesn't have as much like influence on other major science fiction films as some of the other like notable sci-fis that came out of the 60s and 70s have been. So the lasting legacy of this film is probably the monkey suits more than anything. And while those are nice, I just don't know if that's like something that you could raise this whole movie up to the standard of the 4 out of 5 that we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see those points. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think this has been overshadowed by like the newer films, which I think are all like critically in that same ballpark of like 86 and above. People really like the Matt Reeves films, and I think even the new ones were reviewing pretty well.
The prequel trilogy is 93, 91, and 94 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, that's
monster scores.
Yeah, but to me, this, none of that would exist without this first one. And this first one really is like, it's such a good, tight movie that tells the full story. Like, you can watch this and you feel satisfied with the story that you got out of it. You don't feel like you need 4 sequels or 8 or 9 or 10 sequels. But if you want that, it's just a cool bonus. So this movie to me feels like complete within itself. I also think that, one thing we didn't really cover is like the themes of it, but there's a lot of stuff about like science versus, dogmatic religion, or like progress versus keeping the peace. And
yeah, Dr. Zaius' character is both the head scientist and the head religious figure as well.
Yeah, I think the real twist of the movie is that, Cornelius takes Dr. Zaius into the caves in the Forbidden Zone to prove that there was a species of man that had sentience before the apes were there. And I think the real twist is Dr. Zaius says, I already knew that, and I've been suppressing that information for the good of our society. And to me, that's like really interesting science fiction type of stuff. There's like elements of 1984 in there. I just think it's really good. So I think there's like a lot of value in the themes and ideas that this movie is exploring, while at the same time, it's just kind of a fun, action-filled movie. To combine those two things is always like a real challenge, and I think this movie pulls it off flawlessly. Like I said, this kind of feels like an extended Twilight Zone episode, and Twilight Zone's great. I think this movie has a lot to say. I think that the ape costumes hold up pretty perfectly today, and I also think that one of the most underrated parts of this movie is just how funny it is, which we've kind of touched on already. But like I said, the scene where Taylor kisses the doctor is hilarious. There's a line where one of the monkeys says, "Human see, human do," which is pretty funny.
Wow.
There's a part where, so the Council of Elders in the Ape Society is these 3 orangutans, and when they're having a hearing to see if Taylor and the 2 chimpanzee scientists are guilty of heresy, at one point the scientists are talking, and these orangutans don't want to listen, so they do the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil thing, and they're all lined up doing that. And that was just a sight gag that was improvised on the day. I thought that was really funny.
What's great is Dr. Zira's nephew, I think, who the only plot point about him is that he hates adults. He's always complaining about adults not letting him do things.
Yeah. And then Charlton Heston at the end, he's like, "Hey, great job. And remember, don't trust anyone over 30. Like that. I've heard that line before, and I always assumed it was from like Arrested Development or something. I didn't know it was from Planet of the Apes.
First of all, Charlton Heston, why are you coming at us, man?
It's so good. Like, there's so much good in here that I think people don't realize, because they know they know the movie because they've seen spoofs and they've seen the ending, and they think that they don't have to watch this because they already know what happens. But then they're going to miss out on so much other stuff that's so good about this movie.
Yeah, this has to really rank up there in the pantheon of films that people know everything about but haven't actually seen the movie.
Yeah, because I barely know anyone who's seen this movie, including, like, this is a 1968 movie, so that means even, like, our parents might not have, like, seen this movie. Yeah, so I think a lot of people are missing out by not watching this. I just think it's great, so I would say, yeah, at 4 stars, I think it's a little underrated.
Yeah. So I think, getting to our verdict here, I would come in a little overrated. I think if our Letterboxd score is a 4 out of 5, I think it's something like a 3.5 movie, though. I think it is just above what you would expect for like a B movie science fiction film from the 60s. And for that, it's an achievement.
Yeah, for me, I'm definitely on the opposite side. I think it's just a little underrated. I think it falls like just short of masterpiece. And in a lot of ways, like culturally, it is a masterpiece, like with everything it's spawned and influenced. But in terms of like my enjoyment of the movie, I do think you're right. It's a little slow at the beginning, and not everything blends perfectly well together. But I do think that overall, this movie is just like pretty awesome, and that more people should go see it. So I would say it's like a 4.2 out of 5.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the recent ones, but I'm sure there's like video essays or something on YouTube talking about how this franchise is like representative of what society's worries are, like writ large when it comes to societal collapse and things like that, because that's the whole switch flip, right? Is that the monkey society has similar problems that human society has when it comes to leadership structures and science versus religion and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that you're displaying a very human story with non-human characters.
Yeah, I like that. It's a very science fiction type of thing to do. Yeah, just cool movie and cool franchise.
And the fact that, at least from what it sounds like, the recent ones have also done a good job at making the human characters relevant, which you would imagine would be a little difficult to do, especially if, like, Andy Serkis is the main character, basically, of the new ones, right? So one of the apes is the protagonist. It's not a human anymore. So the humans are ancillary to an extent. So the fact that, Matt Reeves and, everyone working on those films were able to, like, make it work, they were able to thread that needle is, it's impressive.
Yeah, I think it's especially kind of incredible if the humans are like replaced every movie, because then you have to introduce these new humans and make them likable, and then have them relate to the story. Like I think the American Godzilla movies and the Transformers movies, those are all also films where like the protagonist is some sort of extraterrestrial or supernatural force. And then there's just some humans in there, and those movies really stumble with making the humans feel relevant. Whereas these, I think, do a good job with it.
Yeah, good flick. Definitely check it out. For a movie released in 1968, holds up just as well as any other like classic movie that I've watched.
Yeah, out of like all the old movies we've watched, this is probably my favorite so far. So yeah, check it out. It's a fun time.
It's on Disney Plus.
Shout out to Disney Plus. So that's going to be it for this episode of the Over Under podcast. Thank you for watching. You can check us out on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. Find us on TikTok while it's still here. Otherwise, we'll be uploading to YouTube Shorts. Check us out on Discord, where we can talk about movies just with you. It'd be cool to get that more active. I think I'm just going to start asking people, hey, did you see this? Every time I see a new movie, I'm just going to ping everyone and say, hey, did you see this? And we'll have fun discussions like this, and it'll be fun. And check out our Patreon, where you can support us with money and get episodes early and get your name in the credits of the YouTube videos. We really appreciate the support that we have already, and we appreciate you watching this. So thank you, and we will see you at the movies. Bye.
You damn dirty apes.